Yes, great. Okay, so I'm really happy to introduce Kayt Hawkins. Kayt has been working in commercial archaeology for over 25 years, primarily as a Romano-British pottery specialist. She was part of the Toolkit for Pottery team, which you're about to learn all about, and is currently secretary of the study group for Roman pottery. And she works for Archaeology Southeast as a post-excavation specialist. Take it away, Kayt.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emily.
Thank
Here,
you. Oh, and do say next when you want me to change the slide.
I will do. Brilliant. Okay, yeah. So yeah, hello and welcome everyone. So I've got the first slot and I'm going to be introducing and hopefully explaining the rationale behind the new CIFA toolkit for fines, the pottery version, and how going through how we mapped the pre-existing standard for pottery studies produced by the three pottery groups that are represented here today into a toolkit format. And as Emily said, I'm presenting today. However, the work was undertaken by myself and Emily, with input from Jen Parker-Wooding at CIFA, Duncan Brown, members of the three pottery groups. And just to be clear, it's all been undertaken with the agreement of the original authors of the pottery standard. Next, please. Brilliant, thanks. Okay, so hopefully everyone here is familiar with the concept of the CIFA toolkits. And alongside the various standard and guidance documents that CIFA have on their website, these specialist online toolkits have become increasingly established as a way of providing accessible guidance and resources to support practitioners across the historic environment sector. And you can see here a list of the current toolkits. And the idea behind the online format was to allow information resources to be accessible and also easily updated. They've been funded to date by Historic England and CIFA, and in all cases, the content of these toolkits has been written by specialists in the sector. Oh, could you just press next, Emily? Thanks. And obviously the toolkit for fines, pottery. Oh, yeah, if you go back one. Sorry. Can you go back?
Sorry, I think there's a delay. Oh, I'm going back.
Back.
Right.
Yeah,
There we
toolkit for
go.
specialist reporting.
All
See,
right,
I was trying to be
gotcha.
clever. Yeah, no. So the toolkit for fines pottery version obviously leans quite heavily as well on the toolkit for specialist reporting. Right, now you can go forward. Thanks, Emily. So I've already mentioned the pre-existing standard for pottery studies. Here it is. And as a specialism, obviously pottery, we benefit from having three amazingly proactive groups, the PCRG, SGRP, and MLPRG, who all came together to produce this standard, published in 2016. And all of the groups over the years have produced period-specific guidance. But this standard was designed to standardize methodologies across pottery studies, and it was the first inclusive standard covering all pottery of all periods and applicable to all types of archaeological projects, so community, professional, and research institutions and organizations. And the standard was and is still free to download, and it's on several places on the internet. But uptake of the standard was dependent on individual specialists. So it's best practice, but there was no way of ensuring specialists followed it or curators asked and insisted that it was used. And the following year, in 2017, we had Alice Cattermole's report on the review of the standard of reporting in archaeological artifacts in England. And that showed quite clearly why strong standards were necessary, and that pottery was in fact one of the few material categories with a fit for purpose standard in place. So with Alice's recommendations and everything else, the fines group then led on producing the toolkit for specialist reporting. And this is why now we've reached the point where it seems appropriate to convert the standard into a toolkit format. Next. So this was our rationale. Covers pretty much most of what I've just said, but just to emphasize, this move was largely to bring the standard into the same format as the toolkits so that we have a compatible, consistent, comprehensive set of guidance. Okay, next, please. Okay, now it wasn't just a straightforward copy and paste from one document into the other, because they are obviously very different types of document. So with the Toolkit being a web resource, it works in quite a different way to a traditional printed format. So Emily and I had to think quite carefully about how people might move around the document, how to structure the sections. So if people jump from one area to another, then it all still makes sense and nothing important gets missed. So we did do some condensing of information from the standard in areas where it was going to be repeated in the toolkit. So where information occurred in multiple sections. So for example, in the standard 1.5 project task definitions, we then did the opposite and we separated those and moved them into the appropriate individual sections so that hopefully it's all clearly explained as you move through. And we also added in obviously references to new resources that have come in since 2016, such as other toolkits to do with archiving and digital data. And obviously we were doubly careful to make sure we were consistent throughout. So you can see here, yeah, and people obviously going into the toolkit, most people are going to be looking at the different reporting types and what's required for those. And we felt it was really important actually to keep that division between recording and reporting as processes. Next, please. So how this worked in practice, you can see here in the orange box, the section headings from the original standard, and in purple, the new headings in the toolkit. And so again, just to state that the toolkit is the standard, just reformatted. So the ethos behind the standard remains, as does pretty much all of the same wording, just rearranged to make it more recognizably compatible with the toolkit for specialist reporting. And probably the trickiest part for us actually was thinking about how to present the relationship between the recording at assessment and the basic record and the detail record with the different types of reports. So the type 2, type 1 and type 3 reports. And those had already been set in the standard for reporting. Next, please. So what type of reports? Like I said, we thought most people will go to the toolkit to look up a particular type of report. And you can see here how they are defined. Yeah. And if people are thinking about what kind of final report they're going to be producing, that's going to influence how they record their assemblage. And again, as we've said here, to remember that recording provides the data and it's the reporting that presents that data and interpretations. So the two are linked. And so, yeah, for an assessment recording, you're going to be looking at a type 2 report. Can I have the next slide, please? So these are the recording methods from the Pottery standard. It's all straightforward. Most people here will be very, very familiar with all of this. So assessment is about establishing the size and the broad character of the assemblage, determining the level of analysis, enabling estimation of the resources that are required, providing enough information about the pottery to facilitate other project tasks. So it's an intermediate stage. Then a basic record would characterize and quantify an assemblage pretty rapidly, but still in enough detail to provide a meaningful publishable report, standalone report, as a final product. And a more detailed record would obviously characterize and quantify that assemblage to a much higher level, but again, to produce a final report, a final outcome. Next, please. And I think this is where it gets interesting. So we know assessment's always the first stage. So when you assess your assemblage, you're looking at producing a type 2 report, which, as I've said, is quite different to a type 1 or a type 3. And it's that type 2 that establishes the potential and informs the next stage. And the next stage, theoretically, being a basic or a detailed record. And can I have so you can see here, obviously, when we're assessing, we want to minimize any risk of double handling the data. You don't want to assess and record and then have to, at a later stage, go back and re-record or add data and reopen bags. Could I have the next slide, please? Oh yeah, there we go. That, oh, sorry, that little box there, that's just to show that obviously the type 2 reporting is covered in the Pottery toolkit under reporting, and in the reporting toolkit under the advisory checklist, which I will come back to in a minute. Next slide, please. So in theory, this is how it would look. Okay, so you do your assessment, type 2 report, sets up how you're going to then do a more full report. Now, what often happens in practice is that it's quite common to front load that assessment record, and rather than do a very basic scan, do more recording. If we know that we're going to be at the end of the process, we're going to be producing a type 1 or a type 3, it's quite often more expedient to front load and then use that assessment and record in more detail. And that decision to front load, that's fine, as long as you then don't then go on and produce a mini analysis report instead of an assessment. And I know I've certainly done that in the past, and I expect other people in the room will have as well. And I'm thinking here about people in the room who are perhaps less experienced and who are coming to this for the first time. So this system is set up to be flexible enough for you to do that. But again, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you've agreed that time and that cost up front, and be certain that you're not going to need to go back and double handle. So you can blur that assessment stage. But also, if you do that, don't fall into the trap of thinking that you then have to present your assessment report, your type 2 report, in effect like a type 3, because you can guarantee that if you do loads of tables and you do lots of things, if you think about the purpose of a type 2 report, to provide that information to help other people in the team finalize their strat and their phasing and things like that, you will end up having to go back and redo tables and other tasks. Okay. Equally, could you just press next again, but not the next slide? Oh, and again. And again. Okay. And like I was saying, it's flexible. So none of our assemblages, when we get them, are standard. It's going to be on a assemblage by assemblage basis. And sometimes you might look at your assemblage and be, okay, this is a huge assemblage. Some of it I'm going to need to do a detailed record on. Some of it I'm going to do a basic record on. And that's absolutely fine. That's why we have at the start of the project, we have all of those conversations and decide how we're going to approach it. Alternatively, it might be really obvious from the outset that your assembly is only ever going to warrant a type 1 report. Maybe it's almost all residual, or it's a very small assemblage. And you think, well, what's the point in assessing and writing a type 2? Because I know I can just do the basic recording now. And again, that's fine, as long as you're clear and you know that's been agreed. Could I have the next slide, please? So just very quickly, here is a screenshot of the advisory checklist. And you can see at the top, it's got 1, 2, 3 for your different types of report. Your type 2 is the first stage. And you can see how flexible this system is. If it's got a cross, it means it needs to be included. If it's got a little circle, it's optional. And there are some things that will always occur in a type 1 or a type 3 report, because that's your final report. And there are other things that will only ever occur in a type 2, like you can see at the bottom here where it says about the statement and recommendations and things. So the toolkits, all of the toolkits, they're there to, they're a resource and a tool to explain why we do things a certain way and how what's expected when we record a pottery assemblage. And they're also there to support you as a specialist when you're talking to other people in the team and explaining why you need to do things and why you need the time to do certain things, because that's how your report will be assessed by other people. And also to make sure that going forward, we can all use each other's reports if we've all been consistent. And I focused on the primary work we do as specialists, but obviously the toolkit for pottery also includes a lot of information about the earlier processes, such as best practice in collection and processing, and also at the other end about archiving. Next slide, please. And the toolkit is coming. I thought it was going to be online today. It isn't quite. It will be imminently. And in case I have completely confused everybody this morning, there will be an online tutorial and a presentation explaining this again. And there's a lot of downloads, resources, and various other things that will help people who are coming to this for the first time. And there's a lot of pottery specialists here today, and I know we've got the question section later, so please do ask any of us any questions. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. It was a whistle stop tour through what we do.
Yeah, thank you for bearing with me on the.
Oh no,
yeah.
that's fine. It's me trying to be too complicated with my slides.
Lily asks, is the toolkit only available to see for members? It's question
No.
time, by the way, so add your questions
Yeah.
to the chat.
No, it's all online. It's not behind a paywall or anything, because the whole point of these is to help people. And I've actually used the reporting toolkit recently with students. One of their first year modules was they had to critique fines reports. So that was quite interesting. I was like, here's the toolkit. Go find a report and critique it. So yeah, no, I think they should always stay open and accessible. Okay.
Sure. Anyone else have any further questions for Kayt? I've just put the toolkit link in the chat if you want to peruse. Yeah, everyone's just saying, looks great, great. There's a labour of love between me and Kayt as an animal bone specialist. I learned a lot.
Yeah, but that was also really good having those conversations, because I think we get so used to just, I've been doing this for so long, you almost do it without thinking. So then to actually have to stop and do this process has been really, really good.